When I started the school, I was like, education just needs a business sector person to come teach it how to run better. No, education just needed teachers' voices to be heard a little bit more and for everybody to have some autonomy. Education needed a smart person to be the windshield between school chaos and nonsense and then letting teachers do what they do best. There's so much that entrepreneurs could take from the ed world. First of which that I learned being in schools is humanity first always.
You're listening to Someday List, a podcast by To Do. Every month, we're sitting down with some of our favorite creatives, founders, and entrepreneurs to talk about what they're doing, how they got there, and what they want to tackle next. Today, we're sitting down with Kyle Smitley, a leader who built her first startup while finishing law school and for the past 10 years has dedicated her career to education as the founder and executive director of Detroit Achievement Academy and Detroit Prep, free public charter schools that have garnered national attention for their holistic and innovative approach to student education and development. And when she's not doing that, she's working on her latest project, Louis Kitchenware, a community-driven, investor-free cookware company that celebrates the everyday home cook. Before we get started, if you're looking for an easy way to get organized, look no further. To Do is a thoughtfully constrained, minimalist to-do list app that is as simple as paper. Because we believe that simple stays organized. To Do helps you focus on the things you need to get done so you have more time for the things that matter. Start your 30-day free trial at todo.com or download the free mobile app. On to the interview. Welcome back to Someday List. I'm your host, Evan Leon, and today I have a very special guest who I'm super excited to talk to. Kyle Smitley is the founder of Detroit Achievement Academy, Detroit Prep, and Louis Kitchenware. Kyle, welcome, and thank you for your time today. We were exchanging emails a while back, and you had said something along the lines of, I'm so sorry for the delay. I'm juggling essentially 4 full-time jobs. For our listener, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and all of the hats that you wear?
So I am the founder and executive director of Detroit Achievement Academy. First, we opened in 2013. It is a small public charter elementary school that serves 300 students on the Northwest side. And we have alumni. We're in year 10. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Detroit Prep, which is a kindergarten through 8th grade elementary school on the east side of Detroit. And we opened in 2016, so year 7 there. And then 3 years ago, technically, I founded Louis Kitchenware, which is an amazing, exciting kitchenware startup that is inspired by everyday home cooks and just wants to make everyone really excited to make dinner on a weeknight at home. So it's like startup founder, decade-long leader, and then I have 2 young kids. And so then I'm also a parent and a partner to a frontline hero emergency room doctor as well. So both of those can feel like a couple of full-time jobs.
So I've been reading some other interviews that you've done, listening to some podcasts you've been on. And prior to all of this, you had also run a multi-million-dollar organic kids clothing startup while also finishing law school. And it's kind of funny, like in some of the other interviews, you almost brush over that fact in the span of a sentence. Have you just always had this capacity to do a lot at once?
Yeah. I think it's sort of like a perfect storm for me, and stemming from a really small town. After I left that small town, it's sort of this voracious curiosity to do as much as possible and learn as much as possible and experience as much as possible. I like to work. I like to work hard. I like to meet people. I like to learn from people. I like to learn new things. I always tell people I feel like I'm playing with house money. Every day is a privilege to be able to like exist. Like it's a privilege that we're alive. It's a privilege that I have a roof over my head. It's a privilege. I have some food to eat. All of this is a privilege. And so if I can max out other parts of my life, especially with an eye on service, that's for me like the secret. If I sort of had a normal day job or something, I don't know that I would be as hungry, but my secret sauce is there being an impact.
And I think that's been a through line through your career. Needless to say, that business was successful, but you weren't feeling like your heart was in it anymore. How long had you worked on that startup, and what was the span of maybe that career limbo, and how did you navigate that?
Gosh, so I started it almost right before. So I took a year off after college, and then I started it in my sort of gap year before law school. Gap year is like what you would call it in hindsight. In real time, it was like, I can't be in this academic, pretty homogenous world of small town Indiana anymore. I need to get out. And I ultimately only went to law school I applied for law school in my year off just to make my parents happy. They were like peak stressed mode. I packed up my car and like 2 suitcases and just moved to San Diego and was surfing all day. And they were sort of like, oh no, is this how it all ends, right? And so I applied to law school just to make them happy. In that year off, I started my company. So that would have been 2008. And then worked on that throughout law school and ultimately sold it at the end of 2012. So I was about 4 years in. And for all 4 of those years, you sort of tell yourself, well, I think maybe I'll like it more next year. And then finally, for me, it was maybe I'll like it more when I'm not doing full-time law school, which is a pretty strict thing. Like you have to go to class. This sounds so stupid, but like you have to go to class. Like it's not like you should go to class. Spoiler alert, in law school, if you miss so many classes, they won't even let you take the final. And so you have to go. And so I couldn't do a lot of things I wanted to do as a up and coming hotshot entrepreneur or whatever, so called. And so I was like, okay, as soon as I'm finished with law school, then I'll really be able to step into being a startup person and I'll really like it. And then I was like, oh no, I actually hate it.
I imagine that's a pretty surreal experience while you're having this dialogue in your head. Are you talking to friends or family? Like who are your sounding boards in that period of your life?
It's such an interesting question. No one's ever asked me that. No one. I'm an only child. So I think I've gotten used to not being able to relate to people sometimes. And I think a lot of people get the sense that they're very different. Things that come really easily to lots of people like have never come easy to me, and vice versa. Things that are like really, really hard to some people come very easily to me. I'm sort of like ET in that sense. Like I like kind of like come trying to explain that like, something is challenging for me and people are like, what? And I'm like, no, I know. It's like, you can't relate. So I got used to, I'm my own best coach. I'm my own competition. I'm sort of like in my own head all the time. Very frequently, my husband, who I absolutely adore, he will be like, how was your day? I'm like, fine. And he's like, anything? Nope. And then 4 weeks later, I forgot to tell you this one thing did happen. It would be a really big thing, a really sad thing. I'm just sort of only in my head.
So you sold your company, you do a little bit of soul searching, which ultimately leads you to this path that you've been on for the past decade, which Detroit Achievement Academy you founded in 2013. So congratulations on 10 years. That's awesome. Thanks. I have an idea of how you might answer this question, but like law school, startup, and now deciding to jump into education and start a public school. Were you ever fazed at all by the massive context switch, or does it not even really register for you?
No, I wasn't fazed, but that's because I was not like brave and noble, because I was very stupid. I tell people a lot, actually, had someone truly given me like Ghost of Christmas Future style, like, no, this is all the things that will happen, I am 100% sure that I would have been like, oh no, never mind. I'm not doing it. I tell people that who are frequently like, you're so chill and you're so happy and you run a school. Anyone can do it then. And I'm like, sure, because I choose joy all the time. I have a mentality that if you look for joy, you'll find it. And so that's my policy. But unless you think that, spending 4 hours dealing with the truly like most horrific parts of society is fulfilling, and then you never actually see that impact, it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, I was not fazed. I jumped right in. I thought I had the skills and knowledge to do it, and let Google take the wheel, and I could figure the rest out. I could hire great people. I knew what my deficits were. I knew how to hire for those. So how hard could it be is kind of like what I thought.
So when you decide you're going to do this thing, coming from your startup background, what are the challenges you see and what's the problem you're going to solve and the opportunity you're going to address in 2013, Kyle Smitley's mind?
Yeah, in my mind, there were great schools in neighborhoods that had a high poverty marker in countless other cities in the United States. Why in Detroit did that not exist? It was simple, right? It was like a recipe. If this can happen elsewhere, why in Detroit are we still letting adults blame kids and blame poverty and blame families for school's failure? So I was like, okay, great. I know I can do it. So the problem I was trying to solve was, can I, with my own 2 hands and like on my back, bring this entire institution? Can I like raise a mountain from the earth? Can I make an entire institution exist in a way that I feel pretty confident that it can, but that every human being in the entire state of Michigan has told me that it can't? Can I do that? Do I believe in myself enough to do it? And my answer was yeah. That was sort of the problem I was trying to solve, is can I do better for an entire region of the city, the northwest side, best side of Detroit? Can I solve that? We did. It was cool.
Was anyone at that time telling you you're out of your mind, you can't do this?
Like, everyone. What was the no one, no human being. Yeah. No human being was like, Yeah, you could do it. Yeah, you know
Uh-huh.
what? There's a path forward here. Everyone was a mixture of it can't be done, it can't be done by you. A lot of subtext around if it could be done, these other qualified people would have already done it. Unfortunately, you'll see they did fail. And
Mhm.
so you don't stand a chance. A lot of we know what good schools are, and we know that your model, because forever, our model was we thought that academic skills and the whole child were equally as important. So we have three dimensions of student achievement. Most schools just have one, which is academic data. Our other two are like character work, like character development, social emotional, and high quality work. So just like the type of work that students create is like how we measure our success and their success. Anyway, and people were like, no, it needs to be like strict. And it was just, yeah, no one, not one. I can think of like three people that were like, you might have a chance.
That obviously doesn't phase you.
Yeah.
I am always interested in how founders or entrepreneurs rally people behind an idea for a thing that doesn't exist yet. So, how do you get teachers, families,
Mhm.
financial backers on board? What is the pitch?
Yeah, the first thing you have to do is stop caring. The sooner you realize your actual success isn't getting people to agree with you, your only measure of success is like, can you get the thing done? Then it frees up a lot of your brain space and your time to do it and do the work and do the thing. So, working to convince people is never a good use of your time. And I think it takes any young leader so much time to realize that. And it's kind of like a heartbreaking realization, right? All you want is a group of people to be like, you're really on to something. You're amazing. And that doesn't come. I'm in year 10 now, and people are like, wow, you did a really remarkable job. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. I know. Year 10. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
To quote the amazing Drake, nothing comes with trophies. And the sooner that you can stop wanting one, the better. Whatever the trophy is to you, you're never going to get it. Just get over it. You got to do the work. But I think being brave and being out there, being the first person with your torch, leading the way and showing here is exactly what I'm going to do, doing that exact thing, even if it's like a micro step, and just working really tirelessly. I always think of the mantra that people have around fundraising always applies in something like this, where it's like, if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. But for me, that always just is such a good reminder of how the human brain works, where it's like,
Mhm.
if you want people to move, you probably shouldn't tell them to move towards a thing. You should just move towards the thing and show them the path. And the sooner you can stop spending time trying to bring people along with you, you'll have a lot more free time to do the work.
You touched a little bit on sort of the approach or the thesis that academic achievement is equally as important as the student themselves, their joy, their happiness. Practically, how do you work towards those goals and improve one or the other?
Yeah, when it's a part of your DNA, it is. So, for example, with social emotional development, we have 7 habits of character at Detroit Achievement Academy. We have 6 at Detroit Prep. And our students, and these are things that we've been working on for a decade, years and years, they're ingrained to every moment of every day. In our students, we have a rubric. So we know what it looks like to show compassion at a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. It looks different when you're in
Mhm.
eighth grade versus kindergarten. And we know what that looks like. Those indicators or items on a rubric are super clear. And the first people to evaluate students on those things, if that's really what we're measuring their success on and our success, which it is, the first people that measure our students on those things are the students themselves.
Mm.
They self reflect on what their biggest area of opportunity is with character. Everyone in this building, if you stop them, you say, what habit of character are you strongest at? They would boop, have an answer right away. And they say, what one are you working on? They boop, and they tell you, what are 3 things I would see you doing if you were really working on showing responsibility? They would boop,
Wow.
boop, boop, boop. And they would tell you exactly what steps they needed to take. Because again, having a growth mindset looks like accepting people are complex and no one's perfect and people are always improving and everyone's on their own path, and self-awareness is the first step. And I think when we were starting the school, we always thought about like from jump, even with tiny kids, because we started only with kindergarten and first grade. We said, okay, when our kids are in 10th grade, straight human beings, right? Those are like real humans. What sort of people is the world going to need? How much of us wish that we were around self-aware adults more often? Now our kids that are big, they're absolute freaks because they're geniuses and they're self-aware and they're kind and they can identify when others are struggling and they can identify where others are. I mean, they're like specimens of people.
So, Detroit Achievement Academy started with 40 students in its first
Oh
year.
my gosh.
Now your two schools serve
Over 700.
over. Oh,
Over 700 total.
wow. So, with that approach and over the last 10 years, how much of it was sort of figuring it out and testing that hypothesis, and how much of the last 10 years has been repeating a methodology, or is it sort of a continuous feedback loop?
That's interesting. So we've, again, the 3 dimensions of student achievement. We have like academic stuff, and then we have character, and then high quality work. And I think in year 1, we removed a habit of character and put one in. Oh, a habit of character. We had respect at first, and we realized like we didn't really like that as a habit of character. So we took that out. And then last year we added one to DAA. So like character, the indicators, all parts of it have been almost unchanging for 10 years across both schools, almost completely unchanging. We've deepened our work, created a broad rubric. We've created beautiful student-facing, developmentally appropriate self-reflections on certain things, really cool portfolios. So we've deepened our work, but nothing has really changed. High quality work, same thing. We've gotten really good. Teachers come together and we do what's called a work sort, and they like take all their student work and they sort it into different categories of quality. And then that helps standardize across the school what sort of quality we're looking for, and what quality is remarkable and what quality is just meeting expectations. And the only thing we've really continued to iterate at a pretty quick pace on is that 3rd dimension of student achievement, which is knowledge and skills. That is like a normal school, grade level content, standards, stuff like that. If we're really doing great math instruction and our kids are all so smart and they all can learn so much and they're excelling in other things, but math is stagnating, great. What do we need to do to change it? So we iterate pretty quick in that dimension.
And so it's been about 10 years. Your first class of students is in high school now?
10th grade.
10th grade. Wow.
They're amazing.
Your schools have been nationally recognized. You've been featured on the Today Show and some other national outlets. I know you're not one to rest on your laurels. So what are you excited to explore next with Detroit Achievement and Detroit Prep?
So we have a really cool 5-year plan. Our 5-year plan was sort of what I did with a lot of our pandemic nervous energy, was just get feedback, iterate. We got feedback on how we did in our previous 5-year plan. We had town halls. We heard feedback. It was all stakeholder created, this 5-year plan, which then translated into this super aggressive 5-year plan around recruiting and retaining world-class educators. We get to be really picky with who we hire each year, which is really cool because we just have a limited number of spots open, because we just grow again very slowly. So we get to be really picky. So it's like, how do we just keep getting the best people? There's a 5-year plan again around like knowledge and skills, grade level content that we talked about. We are outpacing neighboring schools and peer schools. There's still work to be done in closing every possible perceivable gap between our kids who live on the northwest side of Detroit or on the east side of Detroit and kids in affluent areas where their schools are funded higher and their home lives might look different and all facets of their life and generationally look different. I'm hungry to like close that. I think we can do it. That is a big part of the 5-year plan goal. And then continuously perfecting within. Personally, I'm really excited too about doing some really cool stuff with school meals. Healthy food was like a founding vision of ours. And we have done a really good job. Again, compared to peer schools regionally, we're far and above, which is heartbreaking because we have a long ways to go to hit what my vision looks like and what kids truly deserve. And so I want to close that gap a little bit more over the next 5 years, but I am not hungry in any way to expand or grow. That's something I've said no to consistently for the past 10 years. I always try to explain to people who think that they can get my attention and open a school somewhere. I try to explain that like Detroit Prep was an accident. It was only ever supposed to be one school, but Detroit Prep, where my child goes to school, was oops. And so I have no interest in like scaling or anything like that. I want to just crush it for kids, families, teachers.
This interview is brought to you by To Do. You're juggling a lot and you don't know where to start. We've all been there. And that's why we made To Do with the core belief that less is more. To Do is the minimalist to-do list app to ease your cognitive burdens. We are the most refreshing task manager in a sea of monster energy drinks. No pings, no feeds, no comments, just you and the things you need to get done in a simple, intuitive interface. Use code SomedayList for 20% off when you subscribe at TEUXDEUX.com. Back to the interview. I did want to ask you, how do you think of or balance that small focus and big impact with not necessarily having to address, but thinking about some of the broader things going on in the world around education? Teacher retention is one of them, and your schools do remarkable things for teachers, but that has to weigh on your mind to some extent, right?
It's hard for me. I tend to be like a bit of a psycho. I think that between the hours 8 and 4, my only job is working at full 100% pace and speed and obsession. And I like blink and like put a group of kids in my brain and be like, am I singularly advancing their interests, right? Because there's schools have so much like red tape and bureaucracy involved that it can sometimes feel like falling down a spiral of completing certifications that we like had an assembly about Constitution Day. And I'm like, are kids getting smarter from this? Like, is this really changing the outcomes for kids? I don't know. But so if when I ever feel like I'm like, am I singularly like, am I picturing a group of kids? Am I singularly moving them forward? And that's my only lens. Total psychopath, right? It's because we're slammed with asks and requests. And I personally am slammed with tons of like, can you help with this? Can you weigh in on this? Can you serve in this way or whatever? Can you be on this board? Can you do this thing? And I say no to everything. Every single thing is a no, because unless I can picture those 5 kids and be like, how will that help them? And if I'm ever on the fence, I'll like run it by a core group of teachers. Like I've been doing a ton of gun reform advocacy lately. That's previously wasn't a part of my life, but as our teachers put it, no, that is a part of school life now. And that is a part of your job now, actually. That is something you should be thinking about. But to actually answer your question, then my middle ground frequently is, okay, if I'm not advancing these group of 5 kids I'm picturing interest, is there an easy way for me to still make a broader impact? And so then we do open source almost every single facet of running a school. So we have essentially like, it's like a Google Doc, but a wiki page or whatever that's open source, blank link templates, tons of stuff that you would need if you were to want to like open your own school. So where I say no to opening a school in every other city in the country or state or whatever, what I will do is say, but if you want to, I have a budget file, I have position descriptions, I have our charter application, I have an overview of funding sources like federal dollars and state and stuff like that I'll help. So it's hard because I do end up saying no to so many different things that, you know, like I see things happening outside the world, but until I'm like bored doing a good job at my job, I feel like it'd be irresponsible to do too much.
When you were starting down this path, you came in with a set of assumptions or skills that you thought you could bring from the startup private sector into education. Now that you have 10 years under your belt, what do you think the startup world or, you know, other entrepreneurs could take cues from your experience in education over the last decade?
It's so funny. Yeah. When I started the school, I was like, education just needs a business sector person to come teach it how to run better. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, no. That's like not actually true. Well, education just needed teachers' voices to be heard a little bit more and for everybody to have some autonomy. Education needed like a smart person to be the windshield between school chaos and like nonsense and then letting teachers do what they do best. Teachers are very special people. So they needed a normal person to like be a buffer, essentially. There's so much that entrepreneurs could take from the ed world. First of which that I learned being in schools is humanity first always. Relationships first, always. That was something that was completely missing from my San Francisco startup world. It was like lead by fear, lead by intimidation, lead by an obsession with the written word, a handbook, blah. Hard fist leadership is how to move people. And the stronger you are, the more you're respected, right? That patriarchy is strong. And so it took me a long time of working with female educators. And it wasn't something that was taught to me. It was like, I realized that as I changed my approach, I ended up getting way better at my job. That was sort of sealed with the pandemic. We just stopped, dropped, and led with humanity starting, March 13th, 2020. Human beings first, academics like way later. And then we realized we were one of the only schools in the state, maybe like one of the few in the country. Like we didn't have any academic injury the entire pandemic. Like our post-pandemic numbers and our pre-pandemic numbers are the same. And people are like, how? I mean, our teachers are amazing. Our teachers still did the work. I think we did really good work with online instruction, but like the sense of community is what mattered first. And we worked hard to keep that intact. Yeah. So I think the startup world could learn a lot from just like humanity first, relationships first, slowing down, being more thoughtful, being more brave and vulnerable in your leadership, and scale and growth not always being great. It just seems like that's always the carrot for people is like scale growth, hitting certain benchmarks, but then it always ends up being their greatest undoing.
Yeah.
I always joke with some friends that I keep in touch with back in Silicon Valley and in various funds. I would joke about how I would call it mom business school because I would be on maternity leave with a tiny new baby, just becoming like ravenously obsessed with the rise and the fall of all of these new startups. Cause I was like out of the game. I was out of the world. I was in the school world now. And watching these cool young startup people achieve more than I had and feeling like maybe jealous, like maybe not jealous, maybe curious. I don't know. But I was very much tuned in and paying attention. And I would sort of watch their rise, and then how swiftly everything would fall. And then I would like very much pay attention to their post-mortem interviews that they did around what happened and hearing so much around it being that double-sided grow, scale. And that just doesn't really happen in education.
So maybe this is a good spot to segue into your latest venture, or latest as far as I know, which is Louis Kitchenware.
It is. For the love.
At this point, what is going through your mind when that entrepreneurial bug starts biting again? Are you like, oh God, here we go again? Or like, I guess I have to do this.
Yeah. So for a long time, so I always said when I started the schools, I had a 5-year ban on like doing anything, saying yes to anything, starting anything, being on a board of anything, advising anything, because I just say yes to so much. So I wanted to focus for 5 years on the schools. That ended up going for a long time. It's funny that you say that when I get the bug or whatever. I pitch ideas to my husband, not real pitches because it's not like I want to do them, but I'm like, okay, here's an idea. What if there was like a I call them like $1,000 ideas or $10,000 ideas. What sort of a market would exist? What does it look like? I'm a builder by nature. If I see something that I would like to exist, I'm like, okay, that'd be cool if I could make it. So my brain is like always thinking like that. Like, what if there was like a space that you could do this, and so I kind of like let them go. And so I've always walked through that exercise, but then the one that I could not let go that I had for, I remember on my first walk talking about it was like 2017. And that was a kitchenware company that wasn't stuffy, that was really well made with values and was so inclusive, and positive and happy and joyful. And that there wasn't this unnecessary attitude of exclusivity or pretense. And I remember being like, I want this to exist because it was not coincidence. It was like a time in my life where I had enough disposable income to graduate past my law school hand-me-down cookware that my mom gave me. And I was like, okay, what is pop culture telling me I should do with my disposable income? And I went to the internet, Dr. Internet, to answer my question. And the internet had nothing for me. The internet had the major, big, stuffy cookware companies. And I was like, oh, I do feel kind of included by that, but I like don't feel excited by it. I feel kind of excluded, kind of included, but I don't want to be included. The type of marketing they do and how they talk and what sort of cooking they prioritize, and it just felt yuck. And so I thought that it was what I wanted to do. Anyway, eventually I was like, I want to do it, and talk to other people, a lot of mansplaining, a lot of fun explaining, a lot of, I have a buddy who tried this, you should talk to him. And then they're like, oh yeah. And this is just, somebody who was like going through an accelerator who had to come up with a business idea. They didn't feel as strongly as I did about why it needed to exist, but they wanted to explore it as like viable business. They're like, yeah, we looked at this, the cost of goods, and if you can't, you're shipping big pieces of metal, like it just doesn't work, like you're going to be importing and you're going to be doing this and this and this. And the numbers just didn't work. I was like, okay, sure. And then, at the time I was 7 months pregnant. So it's like, what am I going to do? For me, it was just the idea that wouldn't get out of my brain. And so over the pandemic, then I used all my nervous school shutdown energy to obsess over every detail. And by end of 2020, I realized I had a fully put together brand and supply chain. And I had a supplier being like, okay, sign here. And I was like, wait, how did I get here? And then I was like, no, do you still believe in this needing to exist? I'm like, yes, I still believe that this community needs to happen and this messaging needs to happen. And this concept of, no, you're doing a great job. You're cooking at home. Like you're doing great. That needed to happen.
I think this goes back to sort of your human first approach. But one thing in Louis' messaging is that it's community driven and investor free. Why did you feel it was so important to call that out? And how do you define that or execute on that?
I feel like in every corner of Instagram, I'm finding a cute brand. Instagram's telling me to go look at a cute brand. And I do, because I'm a millennial. So whatever Instagram tells me to do, I'm going to do. And so Instagram tells me to go look at this thing. And then I'm sort of left being on this brand's site being like, is this a real thing even? Is a real human being behind this? Or is this just some brands or funds exercise to see if it can trick millennials into spending money and doing a thing? Is this like a bot? Is this some sort of a wild brand from, the far reaches of the planet that is testing me out? And so for me, whenever I have that internal cringe, I'm like, okay, great. I need to pay attention to that. And so we also don't pay for ads. I've talked to you about this. We like don't pay for ads, and that's on purpose. Like we want to use like word of mouth. We want to use real, actual things that are of interest to people to like get attention and spread the word. And we have like a cool referral program that we're rolling out here soon, but like we don't pay for ads and we aren't taking on investment dollars because I want to be able to be like genuinely honest with people. I want to look at people and say like, no, you actually shouldn't. If you have a knife that you got 6 months ago, don't buy this knife, hang tight, buy this other knife. Blah, blah. I want to be able to say that to someone and not have to look at someone and say all the other things you own are bad. You have to replace it with all Louis because I have some investor daddy on me telling me if I don't make blah, 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 that I'm a failure because I'm not scaling fast enough. Like I would rather grow only based on what our community needs and wants and not what some schmuck in a Patagonia vest tells me.
You mentioned earlier your school day is 8 to 4, and that's where you're psychotically focused on improving the lives of your students. Walk me through, I guess, the rest of your day. Like, how do you juggle all of this?
Yeah, it's such a thing. Also because as like frequently a primary caregiver of our kids, my days are often super flexed because I'll be on kid drop-off duty and pickup duty. So I want to name that because I feel like there are so many parents out there that are like, oh, but I have young kids, which almost, because we live in the United States, makes it impossible for me to work, period. So yeah, I am wild about timers and timing. So if I flex anything, I have a timer and I make it up after hours or at another day. School gets lots of breaks and I make sure that I'm compensating my time. I tend to be very focused and efficient with my time because I'm in year 10. Year 10 and me being effective at my job looks different than year 3. I also have a bigger team, so I can be pretty efficient. So I say that because year 3, I was not spending 8 to 4 at my job. I was spending 8 a to 10 p at my job in the building phase. But now at 4 o'clock or at 3:45, if I have to pick up my child, I close both of my schoolwork email tabs so that I can have my laptop open and not have my work day at all. I took my schoolwork email off of my phone as well, which I actually encourage everyone to do. Like, take your work email off your phone. Take your work email off of your phone. If you're sitting at your computer and your desk, that probably means that your body and your brain are at work. So like do your work then. You don't need to have it on your phone. So there are a couple things I do to like sort of help my brain, right? Because that also is a carrot and a stick for my brain too, is that it's like, don't dick around at work then. Try that. At work, I'm not dicking around. At work, I am completely focused on exactly what I need to do. I am very clear before I close my email the day before. I am obsessing about my next day's schedule. So I know where my work time is. I know what I need to get done. People speak to me at work. And if you're not on my schedule to speak to me, I say, why are you speaking to me? In a nice way. Because I would die for any people on my team. But because it is not a chill vibe. For me, if I'm at work, I need to be focused. And then after hours and on breaks are when I'm focused on Louis. I'll occasionally take a lunch break moment like this, or I can do Louis stuff if there's a tug and a pull there. But there have been moments where I have been at work and someone has asked me about Louis and I set a timer on my phone. I will militantly set a timer so that I know exactly how much time I owe back to the schools from Louis out of personal time.
Do you ever feel yourself veering towards burnout, and how do you sort of walk yourself back from that edge?
All the time. I've been in like a build lead season of my life for 15 years. You know, I started law school in 2008 and I have been like doing the most, put that on my headstone actually, like doing the most since 2008. I've been just like doing the most since then, you know. Burnout for me is like, you don't say I'm burnt out. You say, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. And then for me, I'm like, okay, you hate everything. And one thing I never do is I never gaslight myself. So for example, there is a lot that I need to get done in both this job and Louis. And typically, if I'm healed and healthy, I have a lot of fire in my belly after my kids go to bed. So from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. is protected time. My computer is closed. I have my kids. I have no email on my work phone. Maybe I'm texting some friends, but for the most part, it's like kids and family, joy, joy, joy. That mostly refills my bucket. Kids are also like kind of a whole situation. Get ready. And so that mostly refills my bucket. Sometimes it's draining too, but I really love my kids and being around them. So it refills me more than the average parent, I think. And I keep my work bag, and usually I put my work bag right next to my bed because as soon as they go to bed, I'm like excited to like dive into a lot of some of the personal stuff, like ordering my kids new socks and doing some really fun Louis stuff and like finalizing this project and emailing this person back and doing this thing. And I'm really motivated to do this and respond to this personal thing and do this thing. And 3 nights this week, I put my computer next to my bed to like get in bed and do some work. And then at 8 p.m., I was like, don't look at me, to my work bag. I was like, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you ever again. I let myself off the hook all the time. I don't gaslight my decision making ever. And I never beat myself up about stuff. Those are like my rules for burnout. Because like, what a waste of time. We can negative self-talk enough. Don't do that about your decisions about working. So my poor work bag has just sat there 3 nights this week, which was not plan A because I have a lot to do, but it's what I did. Yeah. I was like, nope, not doing it.
I love that. I hope get more of that in the future. Kyle, I find you an incredibly inspiring leader. Where can our listeners find you online if they want to learn more about Detroit Achievement Academy and Detroit Prep or Louis Kitchenware?
So I'm just Kyle Smitley on Instagram and DetroitAchievement.org, DetroitPrep.org, and then Louis, Louis, kitchenware.com.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sunday List. For more interviews, follow the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow along at To-Do App on Instagram or TikTok and at To-Do on Twitter. If you'd like to learn more about these incredible nonprofit charter schools or donate to their mission, you can find links in the show notes, and you can also check out Louis Kitchenware there as well. This podcast is produced by To-Do. Our theme music is composed by Evan Laybourne. I want to thank our guest Kyle Smitley again, and of course, thank you, the listener. We'll catch you next time.